The clinking of crystal glasses celebrating the successful project leader had just filled the Grand Lodge at Lake Tahoe when a violent wheeze tore from my throat, sharp and uncontrollable, like air forced through a broken reed. I'm Quinn Ramsey, a fine art conservation specialist, someone who spends her days in quiet studios with delicate brushes and chemical solutions, meticulously saving paintings that have survived centuries of neglect, far more at home, with fragile canvases than in crowded company retreats like this one. The room was alive with colleagues toasting under the warm glow of the massive fireplace, the snowy lake glittering outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, everyone focused on the evening's star performer. I sat toward the end of the long wooden table, trying to blend in despite feeling completely out of place among all the finance suits and forced small talk. My phone buzzed insistently on the tablecloth. The name on the screen made me pause. Graham Sullivan, the billionaire CEO, whose private collection I'd been consulting on for months. He had an urgent question about pigment stabilization in one of the pieces, something that couldn't wait until morning. I hesitated, glancing around the lively dinner, but professional habit won out. I accepted the video call, angling the phone slightly so I could answer without drawing too much attention. That's when the mocking voice rang out loud enough for the entire table to hear. "Come on, Quinn. Don't start with the dramatic shellfish and asthma routine again. It's just soup. No need to make everything about you tonight." A bowl of truffle mushroom soup was set in front of me with a flourish, its surface swirling with golden amber oil that caught the candlelight beautifully. Not wanting to create a scene or give anyone more ammunition, I forced a small smile and took a careful spoonful. The reaction hit instantly. My throat seized shut like a fist closing around my windpipe. My chest constricted wheezes turning into desperate, ragged gasps as my body buckled and I collapsed from the chair onto the hardwood floor. Vision blurring hives racing across my skin. And on the open video call, Graham Sullivan watched it all unfold, his voice suddenly booming through the speakers in alarm as he recognized the deadly signs of anaphylaxis. If you've ever had a family joke cross the line into something dangerous or felt dismissed about a real health issue by someone close, drop your story in the comments. I read every one and want to know I'm not alone. Now, let's get back to what happened next. To understand how that bowl of soup ended up in front of me, I need to go back just a few hours earlier that same day at the lodge, when everyone was still relaxed and scattered around the common areas before the formal dinner began. I remember sitting by one of the large windows in the lounge watching snow dust the pines outside, trying to shake off the familiar feeling of being the odd one out at these company events. Growing up, that feeling had been constant. When I was 12 and Travis 15, I once spent weeks preparing a detailed school project on historical art techniques that earned top marks and a special mention from the teacher. My parents, Walter and Frances Ramsey, barely acknowledged it. That same week, Travis scraped through a mediocre soccer season, and they threw a backyard celebration with banners and cake, telling everyone how proud they were of their son's leadership on the field. It wasn't the only time. My efforts were always quiet achievements, while even his average results got framed photos and endless praise. It shaped us differently. He learned the world revolved around him, and I learned to work twice as hard for half the recognition. That dynamic never really changed as we got older. At 26, I had built a career as a fine art conservation specialist, handling priceless paintings with the kind of meticulous care that demands absolute precision. One wrong chemical mix or careless stroke, and centuries of history could be lost forever. The job trained me to question everything, to test and retest, to respect how fragile beauty can be when handled recklessly. Travis, at 29, had climbed fast in corporate finance, managing high-stakes projects with bold moves and charisma that impressed executives. He thrived on being the center of attention, the one closing deals and getting the loudest applause. The tension that led to everything exploding started weeks earlier, though I didn't see it building the way he did. Graham Sullivan's company had acquired a significant private collection of 19th century American paintings, and someone in their acquisitions team recommended me for the conservation consultation. It began with emails, detailed questions about canvas relining, varnish removal, and pigment stability. Graham himself got involved, impressed enough to loop me in directly. For me, it was professional excitement. These were rare opportunities to work on pieces most conservators only read about in journals. Travis heard about it through office chatter. His firm was partnering with Graham's conglomerate on a major deal, and he had been angling for FaceTime with the CEO, preparing presentations and networking, hard to position himself as the key player. When he found out Graham was communicating with me, his quieter, less ambitious sister, about art instead of finance, it hit a nerve. He never said it outright, but I caught the sidelong glances and tight smiles whenever the topic came up at family calls. That afternoon at the lodge, while colleagues mingled with coffee and board games in the lounge, my phone lit up with an incoming video call from Graham. He apologized for the timing but said he needed clarification on a specific treatment plan before signing off on the next phase. I stepped into the quieter hallway outside the main area to take it, speaking softly about pH balance solutions and reversible adhesives. Travis wandered by, drink in hand, pretending to head toward the restrooms. He slowed, eavesdropping just long enough to hear Graham thank me enthusiastically and mention how valuable my expertise had become to the project. His expression shifted, jaw-tightening, eyes narrowing in that way I recognized from childhood when something didn't go his way. He forced a laugh as he passed, muttering something about art nerds stealing the spotlight again, but the bitterness underneath was unmistakable. This retreat was supposed to be his moment to shine in front of senior partners and potential big clients like Graham. Instead, his little sister was getting direct access. I finished the call and returned to the lounge, brushing off the exchange. Dinner was still an hour away, and I figured he'd cool down with another drink. What I didn't know was that he headed straight to the kitchen under the pretense of complimenting the chef on the menu. Chef Marco was busy directing the final preparations when Travis leaned in, casually flashing that easy charm he used on everyone. He asked about the signature truffle mushroom soup, praising how renowned it was, then added with a wink that his sister had a tendency to overreact to certain ingredients. He suggested, just as a light-hearted favor, adding a touch of refined shellfish oil to one specific bowl, the one meant for me. He claimed it would blend perfectly with the earthiness, making it extra special, and laughed it off as a harmless way to loosen me up. In his mind, a tiny amount would cause minor discomfort at most, maybe some itching or a scratchy throat to embarrass me in front of the crowd and shift attention back where it belonged. He knew I'd been hospitalized before for severe reactions, but he convinced himself this was different, controlled, nothing serious. Just enough to make a point. I had no idea any of that happened. When the dinner bell rang and we all moved to the dining room, I took my seat, still preoccupied with notes from the call, vaguely aware of a faint, uneasy feeling in my stomach. I pushed it aside. Retreats were meant to be enjoyable, and I didn't want to ruin the atmosphere by overthinking family tension yet again. The spoonful had barely settled when everything changed in an instant. My throat tightened with terrifying speed, as if an invisible hand had wrapped around it and squeezed without mercy. The familiar burn of an asthma flare ignited in my chest, but this was worse. Far worse, combined with the rapid swell of anaphylaxis that I knew all too well from past scares. Hives erupted across my arms and neck, hot and angry, spreading like wildfire under my skin. My breaths came in ragged, wheezing gasps that echoed unnaturally loud in the suddenly silent dining room, each one shallower than the last, as my airway narrowed to almost nothing. The chair scraped back as my legs gave way, and I hit the hardwood floor hard, the impact jarring but distant compared to the crushing pressure building inside. Plates and glasses clinked in panic as people stood, chairs toppling, voices rising in confusion. Travis's laugh cut through, first loud, dismissive, the same tone he used whenever my health issues came up. "See? She's doing it again. putting on the whole dramatic show to steal the spotlight like always. He said it with a grin, looking around the table for agreement, his words carrying over the murmurs as if this were just another family exaggeration. But then the wheezes grew harsher, more desperate, nothing like the controlled breathing I'd managed during milder attacks. My hands clawed at my neck instinctively, nails digging into swelling skin vision spotting at the edges. The grin on his face faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. He took a half step back, the mockery dying in his throat as realization crept in that this wasn't stopping on its own. The phone still propped on the table from the call broadcast everything. Graham Sullivan's face filled the screen, his expression shifting from professional focus to outright horror. He had seen the signs before his own daughter battled severe allergies, and he recognized the life-threatening cascade immediately. That's anaphylaxis. Get her EpiPen now, she's closing up. His voice boomed through the speakers, sharp and commanding, cutting through the frozen shock around the table. Chaos erupted properly then. Someone shouted for space, another knocked over a water glass, reaching across. Hands fumbled through my purse on the chair beside me, spilling lipstick and notes onto the floor in the frantic search. Where is it? Does anyone know how to use one? A colleague? Stammered voice, trembling. The auto-injector finally emerged, but hesitation hung in the air. No one wanted to be the one to jab it wrong. Graham's instructions rang out clear and urgent. Pull the cap swing hard into the outer thigh hold for 3 seconds. Do it through the fabric if you have to. A senior manager from Travis's team grabbed it, hands shaking as he knelt beside me, pausing for a split second with wide eyes before slamming it firmly into my leg. The needle punched through my dress, the click loud in the tense silence that followed. The epinephrine surged like ice through my veins, cold and sharp, fighting back against the swelling. It wasn't instant relief. The pressure eased only slightly at first, enough for thin whistles of air to slip through, but the pain lingered, raw and overwhelming. My tongue felt thick, lips numb and ballooning, every shallow breath a battle. Throughout it all, the video call recorded automatically. Graham's app had a default setting for consultations, capturing the audio and video from the moment the reaction started, including Travis's initial sarcasm and the escalating panic. No one thought to end the call. His steady voice stayed on the line, directing people to elevate my legs and watch for biphasic risks, reminding them that a second wave could hit later. The room held its breath as paramedics were called. The lodge had on-site medical support for guests, but an ambulance from nearby Truckee was dispatched anyway. Staff formed a loose barrier around the table, instinctively preserving the scene, the untouched bowls, the spilled purse, my phone still propped and running. In the haze, I caught fragments, Graham promising full cooperation, assuring everyone help was coming. Travis stood frozen off to the side, face pale, no longer laughing, the reality sinking in deeper with every labored wheeze from me. And in that moment, as the edges of my vision darkened, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: whatever came next, nothing would ever be the same again. The ambulance ride to the local hospital in Truckee passed in a fog of oxygen masks and monitoring beeps, the epinephrine keeping the worst at bay, but leaving me drained and aching. By the time they wheeled me into a private room for observation, the adrenaline crash had set in, every muscle, heavy throat still raw from the swelling. A nurse adjusting my IV mentioned in passing that the lodge manager had already taken statements from the kitchen staff to cover liability. Chef Marco and the server Nolan had volunteered details right away, how Travis specifically asked for refined shellfish oil to be added to one bowl of the truffle mushroom soup, the one meant for me. Nolan recalled the exact words with a grin at the time: "Let my sister try the special version." They described it as casual, almost joking, but precise enough that no one misunderstood which place setting it was for. The manager sealed the remaining food samples and noted everything down, standard procedure for potential incidents at high-end venues. I lay there staring at the ceiling tiles, processing how close it had been when the door opened and my parents walked in. Walter and Francis looked older than I remembered, faces drawn and pale under the fluorescent lights. Travis trailed behind them, hands in his pockets, avoiding eye contact. This was the first time I had ever seen genuine uncertainty in their expressions when looking at him. No immediate defense, no quick dismissal of my side. Frances reached for my hand first, her grip trembling. "Honey, we're so sorry this happened. The doctors say you'll be okay, thank God." Walter nodded, clearing his throat, but his gaze shifted to Travis with something new, disappointment that cut deeper than any argument we'd had before. They had always shielded him, excusing reckless choices as boys being boys or high spirits. But watching me wheeled in on a stretcher had cracked that pattern, at least for the moment. Travis mumbled an apology, voice low, saying he never thought it would go that far. I listened without responding much, voice hoarse and energy low. When the topic of police came up, someone at the lodge mentioned reporting it. They looked to me. I shook my head weakly. Not yet. I needed recovery time first, and more importantly, space to ensure statements stayed consistent without pressure from family connections or company influence. Rushing into criminal charges could let things get muddled. I wanted control over what came next. They left after a while, promising to check in soon, the air thick with unspoken tension. The room felt quieter, heavier, until Delaney arrived later that night. She had driven straight from the city the moment a mutual friend from the retreat texted her, bursting in with worried eyes and a tight hug that careful around the IV lines. She pulled the visitor chair close, holding my hand as the monitors beeped steadily. "I can't believe he did that. Tell me everything." I recounted what I knew, voice scratching but steady. She listened without interrupting, then helped jot down notes from the doctor who stopped by, details on biphasic anaphylaxis risks, how a second reaction could hit hours later, even after initial treatment, the reason for overnight monitoring, and strict allergen avoidance. Having her there grounded me. Delaney had been my confidant since college, the one person who never bought into the family narrative that I was overly sensitive. She reinforced what my gut already knew. This crossed every line, and letting it slide again would only invite worse. As the night nurse checked vitals, Delaney stayed her presence, strengthening the quiet resolve building inside me. No more excusing, no more minimizing for the sake of peace. Monitors beeped steadily in the quiet room, a constant reminder that my body was still on high alert. Lying there under the harsh hospital lights, I couldn't stop replaying the moment my airway shut down completely. What if Graham's call had come just minutes later? What if no one around the table knew how to use an EpiPen? The thought sent cold waves through me, not panic, but a deep, unsettling fear that settled in my bones. For the first time, I truly confronted how fragile life could be when someone close decided to gamble with it. That fear didn't paralyze me. It sharpened everything, turning shock into a clear, unflinching focus. Delaney rarely left my side during those long observation days. She brought books I couldn't concentrate on and take-out coffee that tasted like normalcy, sitting cross-legged in the vinyl chair with her laptop balanced on the bed rail. When I felt ready, she helped dial Mr. Whitaker, the civil litigation attorney I'd hired years ago for a contract dispute over a damaged Renaissance-era canvas at a gallery. He answered on the second ring, voice calm and professional, as I explained the situation in a hoarse whisper. He didn't waste time on sympathy. He asked for specifics and got to work immediately. Graham Sullivan forwarded the full video recording from the call. Without hesitation, his tech team extracted it. Cleanly, time-stamped and unedited, showing every second from the mocking comment to the injection. Mr. Whitaker coordinated with the hospital for comprehensive medical reports. Detailed notes on vocal cord inflammation, cardiac strain from repeated epinephrine doses, and psychological evaluations noting acute anxiety triggers around food. Signed affidavits arrived from Chef Marco and Nolan, notarized quickly to lock in their accounts before any second thoughts or external influence. I scrolled through messages from my parents on the muted phone screen. Francis sent long paragraphs filled with worry, asking if I needed anything, reminding me how much they loved both their children. Walter followed up with shorter notes, emphasizing family unity and hoping we could talk soon. Travis's texts were defensive at first, insisting it was meant as harmless teasing, then shifting to apologies laced with excuses about stress from work. I read them all, feeling the old pull to respond to smooth things over like I always had. But this time I set the phone face down and turned away. Instead, I directed my energy toward the case file growing under Mr. Whitaker's guidance. We outlined damages meticulously, hospital bills already mounting into tens of thousands, projected speech therapy sessions for the throat damage, lost consulting income during recovery when I couldn't travel to studios or handle delicate materials. Then the intangibles, emotional distress from betrayal by blood, the constant vigilance now required around meals therapy to manage newfound distrust. Punitive elements to deter similar recklessness. The total came to $1 million, a figure substantial enough to reflect the severity without appearing vindictive to a mediator. Mr. Whitaker explained the strategy plainly over speakerphone while Delaney took notes. Civil settlement offered control. I could enforce terms, include confidentiality if needed, avoid the unpredictability of criminal proceedings where outcomes depended on prosecutors. It wasn't forgiveness, it was accountability on my terms. Silence toward my family became deliberate, a shield against manipulation. Every unanswered message from them chipped away at their assumptions, forcing them to confront the gravity without my reassurance to soften it. Nights were the hardest when the ward quieted and monitors glowed in the dark. I'd wake gasping from dreams of suffocation, heart racing until a nurse checked in. Delaney slept on the pull-out chair some evenings, her presence a steady anchor. She didn't push me to talk feelings. She simply reminded me of my strength, pointing out how far I'd come, building a career on precision and patience. Those conversations rebuilt my resolve. Imposing distance now protected the evidence, and my sanity preventing emotional pleas from derailing justice. By the time discharge papers were signed, the dossier felt solid, unassailable. Mr. Whitaker confirmed all pieces were in place: video, medical documentation, witness statements. I left the hospital with prescriptions and follow-up appointments, but more importantly, with a plan that honored the scare I'd survived. Responding to family would come later, if at all. Right now, preparation mattered more than reconciliation. Back in my own apartment, the quiet felt both comforting and oppressive at once. The familiar surroundings, shelves lined with conservation tools, framed prints waiting for treatment. The soft hum of the dehumidifier protecting delicate papers should have been a refuge. Instead, doubt crept in during the still moments, whispering questions I hadn't allowed myself to entertain in the hospital. Was pushing forward really justice, or was I tearing apart the only family I'd ever known? The thought hit hardest late at night, staring at the ceiling while remnants of throat soreness reminded me of every forced swallow. I'd picture my parents' faces in that hospital room, the way Francis's hand trembled. Walter's usual confidence cracked. Travis might be reckless, but he was still my brother, the one who'd once defended me from playground bullies, even if those protective instincts faded as we grew older. Going through with a demand that could bankrupt them felt extreme, almost cruel. What if reconciliation was possible? What if time healed this, like it had smaller slights before? Those moments of hesitation never lasted long. Each time guilt surfaced, memory dragged me back to the dining room floor, gasping desperately while Travis dismissed it as drama. His initial laugh, the casual cruelty in assuming I'd fake something so serious for attention, it erased any illusion of innocent misunderstanding. Anger followed quickly, hot and justified, drowning out the doubt. He had known the risks, chosen to ignore them for a momentary power play. Forgiveness without consequence would only teach him that boundaries didn't matter when it came to me. The Ramsey household didn't let silence linger. Deliveries started arriving, bouquets of lilies from Frances with cards in her elegant handwriting, pleading for a chance to talk things through as a family, emphasizing how much pain this caused everyone. Walter sent practical items, gift cards for meal delivery, a note about focusing on healing rather than conflict. Travis's messages carried a different tone, confident at first that I'd come around, pointing out how public fallout could hurt his career trajectory and the firm's reputation. He admitted fault in a backhanded way, framing it as a stupid mistake blown out of proportion, suggesting we meet privately to put it behind us before things escalated unnecessarily. I read every word on the glowing screen, thumb hovering over reply, but never typed back. The quiet response or lack of one became intentional, a boundary I controlled. Let them wonder, let assumption fill the void. They expected the old Quinn, the one who smoothed edges and accepted apologies, to keep peace. This version stayed offline, phone on do not disturb, focusing instead on daily routines that rebuilt strength, gentle walks around the neighborhood, careful meals planned with allergen lists, studio sessions handling less demanding projects to ease back into work. Mr. Whitaker updated regularly over secure calls, confirming final details locked in place. The mediation date was set for exactly 3 weeks post-incident at a neutral conference room downtown, standard for civil cases aiming to avoid court. He walked me through logistics, what to expect, how to present calmly the strength of our position with irrefutable evidence. No surprises, no room for negotiation on core terms. The 1 million figure stood firm, broken down transparently across categories that any reasonable mediator would recognize as fair given the circumstances. In those weeks, change solidified inside me. The accommodating sister who absorbed hurts to maintain harmony faded, replaced by someone determined to dictate outcomes. Delaney checked in often, dropping by with takeout and quiet company, reinforcing that protecting myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. Conversations with her clarified the shift. Control wasn't vengeance, it was survival evolved. Family ties, I realized, couldn't override basic safety. As the mediation approached, their outreach grew more urgent. Frances leaving voicemails thick with emotion, Walter hinting at compromises, Travis oscillating between contrition and frustration. My continued silence unsettled them, eroding certainty that blood would win out. Mr. Whitaker noted it too, a strategic advantage, letting pressure build on their side. By the scheduled date, resolve felt absolute. No more second-guessing, no lingering guilt. The process ahead represented accountability, not destruction, and I walked toward it, ready to own the conclusion entirely. The neutral mediation room felt cold, despite the thermostat beige walls and a long conference table doing nothing to ease the tension thick in the air. Mr. Whitaker sat beside me, folder organized and laptop ready, his expression professional and unreadable. Across from us, Travis shifted in his seat suit, slightly rumpled, while Walter and Frances flanked him like protective barriers, their faces etched with a mix of hope and anxiety. We started with preliminaries. The mediator, a retired judge with a calm demeanor, outlined ground rules for civility and focus. Then Mr. Whitaker took the floor, clicking play on the laptop connected to the room's projector. The full video from Graham Sullivan's call filled the screen, audio crisp and undeniable. Travis's mocking words echoed, first light and dismissive, followed by the sudden chaos, my wheezes growing desperate, body collapsing, Graham's urgent commands cutting through as colleagues fumbled with the EpiPen. The footage captured every angle from the phone's position, unedited and time-stamped. Travis paled as his own voice played back the initial sarcasm, now sounding cruel, in the quiet room. He leaned forward when it ended, hands clasped tight. That doesn't show the whole context. I never meant for it to go that far. I thought a tiny amount would just make her uncomfortable, nothing life-threatening. His tone aimed for reasonableness, but it cracked under the weight of the recording. Frances jumped in immediately, voice trembling with emotion. Please, we're begging you, this would destroy everything. Family sticks together through mistakes. He's your brother. One error shouldn't end us all. Walter added weight. His usual authoritative manner softened. Think about what this does to everyone. Blood runs deeper than any disagreement. We've always been there for each other. I sat silent through their pleas, letting the words hang without reaction. Whitaker slid copies of the medical reports across the table pages detailing throat damage, cardiac monitoring, projected therapy costs. Affidavits from the chef and server followed, signed and notarized. The evidence stack grew methodical and irrefutable. When the mediator turned to me for response, I spoke evenly, voice still carrying a faint rasp from the injury. This path civil resolution lets me decide the outcome instead of leaving it to prosecutors and trials that drag on for years. It's not about endless punishment, it's accountability with closure. I paused, meeting their eyes one by one. $1 million covers documented losses, medical expenses already incurred, future care, income disruption, emotional impact. Or we proceed criminally, where aggravated assault charges could mean far worse. The room erupted then. Travis pushed back hardest, arguing the amount was outrageous, that no jury would see it as intentional harm. Francis dissolved into tears, repeating how sorry they all were, how forgiveness healed families. Walter tried negotiating lower figures, citing retirement savings and house equity, appealing to shared history. The mediator intervened occasionally, keeping discussion on track. But the hour stretched with back-and-forth offers, countered terms, debated emotions flaring, then subsiding. Mr. Whitaker remained steady, referencing precedents for similar personal injury settlements involving deliberate allergen exposure. The video played a second time at the mediator's suggestion, silencing fresh denials. Reality settled heavier with each viewing. Eventually, exhaustion won. Travis's lawyer, consulted by phone, midway advised acceptance. The alternative risked felony records and unlimited liability in court. Papers were produced, settlement agreement, payment schedule with parents as co-guarantors, non-disclosure clause, protecting all parties from public fallout. Hands shook as pens moved. Travis first, face hardened. Francis with quiet sobs. Walter, last jaw set. I signed without hesitation, the final stroke clean. Standing, I addressed them directly for the first time. From this moment, we're done. No more contact, no family obligations. This ends here. The mediator confirmed, execution copies distributed. I gathered my folder and walked out, door closing softly behind me, leaving their stunned silence in the room. Word of the incident spread quietly but relentlessly through professional circles in the finance world. Whispers about a reckless prank at a company retreat that nearly turned deadly reached partners and clients, framing Travis as unstable and a potential liability. Firms in the industry prioritized reputation above all, and within months, his position became untenable. The official reason cited restructuring, but everyone understood the underlying cause. Offers dried up, references went cold, and he found himself unemployed, resume tainted by association with a high-profile personal scandal. The settlement payments hit hard and fast. With no steady income, Travis defaulted early on installments, forcing Walter and Francis to step in as guarantors. They refinanced their spacious suburban home, pulling equity to cover the bulk while committing to a grueling schedule for the rest. The once impressive property now carried a second mortgage, monthly strains eating into retirement savings they had carefully built over decades. Social invitations slowed, old friends distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the drama, leaving the couple increasingly isolated in a community where appearances mattered. Travis relocated to a modest one-bedroom rental on the outskirts of a smaller city, far enough to avoid familiar faces. Entry-level jobs in unrelated fields became his reality, data entry, customer service lines roles, paying fractions of his former salary, barely covering basics after garnishments and legal fees. Credit scores, plummeted doors closing on loans, or better opportunities trapping him in a cycle of financial recovery that felt endless. Meanwhile, the settlement funds transformed my path. I leased a bright, expansive studio in an up-and-coming arts district, walls lined with custom shelving for tools and works in progress. Natural light pouring through skylights, ideal for examining pigments and canvas fibers. Quinn Ramsey Conservation launched, officially specializing in high-end restorations for private collectors and institutions. The capital covered state-of-the-art equipment, digital microscopes, climate-controlled storage, specialized solvents, and marketing that highlighted my expertise without ever mentioning the incident. Graham Sullivan honored his promise of support, awarding a multi-year contract for his growing collection that provided stable revenue from day one. Word spread in art circles about the meticulous conservator who treated each piece with surgical precision, turning fragile relics into revived masterpieces. Referrals followed, museums needing emergency interventions after damaged galleries preparing for exhibitions, private owners trusting heirlooms to my care. Revenue grew steadily. Staff expanded to include 2 skilled assistants, and my name appeared in industry journals for successful projects on notable works. Days settled into a rhythm I cherished, mornings assessing new arrivals under magnification, afternoons mixing custom solutions or delicately inpainting losses, evenings reviewing progress photos that documented transformations. The studio smelled of linen and mild adhesive sounds, limited to soft brush strokes and occasional classical playlists. No more walking on eggshells around family expectations, no justifying choices that differed from the corporate path. Occasionally, updates filtered through mutual contacts. Travis struggling in obscurity, my parents withdrawing from social clubs they once hosted. I felt no satisfaction in their hardship, only a quiet acceptance that consequences had followed actions. Cutting ties completely freed me from the toxic pull, allowing energy once spent on mediation and defense to flow into creation instead. Looking back from the calm of my studio, surrounded by canvases breathing new life under careful hands, the lesson crystallized clearly. Not every blood connection deserves preservation. Some damage runs too deep, acid eating away at foundations no matter how gently handled. True restoration begins with removing harmful elements entirely, stabilizing what remains, and building stronger supports from scratch. Prioritizing self-protection isn't selfish. It's the only way to ensure survival and growth. Building a life on my terms with relationships chosen for mutual respect rather than obligation brought peace I never knew possible. Blood may bind at birth, but it doesn't obligate endurance of poison. Choosing to walk away and thrive independently, that's the real victory.